She was 22 years old when her father sold her to two men, not one, but two, Korean Mafia twins, who didn't ask for her hand in marriage. They demanded it. This is how a Lagos girl with a finance degree and a future mapped out ended up on a plane to Seoul, flying straight into a nightmare she never saw coming. Before we begin, besties, please don't forget to like and subscribe. This is your only way of supporting us, as we also promise to bring you interesting and hooking stories every single day. Also, you can tell me in the comments section where you are watching from and what time it is there. I want to know how my story of love has traveled. 3 weeks earlier, Sophia had a plan. Graduate top of her class in economics, land the banking job she'd been interviewing for, move her younger sister out of their cramped flat in Surulere, and finally live the life she'd worked so hard for. Her WhatsApp was full of congratulations messages. Her mom was already planning the Thanksgiving service, and everything felt like it was falling into place. She had no idea that her father had walked into the wrong room 3 months prior, shaken the wrong hand, and made a bet he could never pay back. She didn't know any of that until 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, when someone started pounding on their door like the building was on fire. Sophia woke up to her mother screaming. Not the angry kind, the terrified kind. She stumbled into the living room and found her uncle drenched in sweat, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone, eyes wild with panic. "Where is he?" he kept shouting. "Where's your father?" Her dad emerged from the bedroom, and Sophia will never forget the look on his face. Guilt, shame, the kind of fear that makes a grown man look small. "Uncle, what's going on?" she asked, her voice barely steady. He turned to her, looked her dead in the eye, and said the words that would shatter her entire world. "Your father stole 25 million naira from the Han syndicate." The room went silent. Her mother gasped. Her sister started crying. Sophia just stood there, frozen, because she knew that name. Everyone knew that name. The Han syndicate wasn't some local gang you could negotiate with or pay off in installments. They were Korean mafia with deep roots in West Africa, running smuggling operations, extortion rings, high-stakes gambling that made people disappear if they didn't pay up. And her father had been doing business with them? Her uncle pulled out his phone and showed them a message. It was in Korean and English. "We don't want the money. We want the daughter." Sophia read it 3 times before her brain caught up. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Her uncle exhaled like a dying man. "They're offering a deal. You marry into the family, the debt disappears, and everyone lives." "Marry who?" her mother asked, voice trembling. Her uncle looked at Sophia with something close to pity. "The Han twins." The room tilted. "Twins?" Sophia's voice cracked. "You're telling me I have to marry 2 men?" He nodded slowly, deliberately. "They run the West African operations together, enforcers for the Han family's 3rd branch, and they've decided that your father's debt can be paid with you." Sophia felt her stomach turn inside out. This wasn't marriage. This was ownership. She looked at her father, the man who used to carry her on his shoulders, who taught her how to count money, who told her she'd be someone important one day. Now he couldn't even meet her eyes. "I'm not doing this," she said, her voice cold and steady. Her uncle stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Then they'll kill him tonight, and when they're done with him, they'll come for your mother, your sister, and you." He let that sink in. Or you get on a plane to Seoul, you marry them, you survive, and maybe you find a way out later. Sophia felt the tears come, hot and bitter. She hated him. God, she hated her father in that moment. But she loved her sister more. 2 days later, Sophia stood at Murtala Muhammad International Airport with a carry-on bag and 2 plane tickets, Lagos to Seoul, one way. Her mother cried, her sister clung to her, and her father stood in the corner, silent and broken. Sophia didn't say goodbye to him. She just walked through the gate, boarded the plane, and sat by the window as the city she loved disappeared beneath the clouds. She thought about the twins waiting for her in Seoul, men she'd never met, whose names she didn't even know yet. All she knew was that somewhere in that glittering city below, two men thought they owned her now. As the plane cruised over the dark ocean, Sophia made herself a promise. She'd survive this, and when the time was right, she'd make every single one of them regret it. But first, she had to meet them, and trust me, the twins were nothing like she expected. One of them smiled when he saw her. The other didn't smile at all. That's when she realized the nightmare was only just beginning. The plane touched down at Incheon just after dawn, and by the time Sophia cleared customs and stepped into the arrivals hall, exhaustion had settled into her bones like lead. She hadn't slept on the flight, couldn't sleep. Not when every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face, her sister's tears, her uncle's shaking hands. Now she stood in the middle of a bustling Seoul airport, surrounded by a language she didn't speak, and faces that didn't look back, clutching her carry-on like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. A man in a black suit appeared beside her, holding a sign with her name on it. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself, just gestured toward the exit and led her to a sleek black car waiting at the curb. The drive-through Seoul was a blur of neon signs, towering skyscrapers, and streets so clean they looked unreal. She pressed her forehead against the window and tried not to think about what was waiting for her at the end of this ride. The car pulled up to a mansion in Gangnam that looked like it had been carved from marble and money. The gates opened automatically, revealing a sprawling estate with manicured gardens, fountains, and a driveway so long it felt like a runway. The foyer inside was all cold grandeur, white marble floors that echoed with every step, high ceilings that swallowed sound, walls lined with art that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood back home. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum, beautiful but lifeless, watching. Sophia stood in the center of that vast space, jet-lagged and disoriented, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. She refused to show fear. She wouldn't give them that. Then she heard footsteps. Two men walked in together, side by side, and Sophia's breath caught in her throat. They were identical. Same sharp jawline, same height, same immaculate black suits tailored to perfection. But the moment they looked at her, she knew they were nothing alike. The first one smiled. It was warm, disarming. The kind of smile that reached his eyes and made you forget for a second that you were standing in a Mafia mansion. "You must be exhausted," he said, his voice smooth and gentle. "Welcome home, Sophia." The second one didn't smile. His gaze was cold, assessing, like he was cataloging every detail of her face, her posture, her fear. "Come inside," he said flatly. "We have things to discuss." They led her to a dining room with a table so long it could seat 20 people, but only 3 chairs were pulled out. Sophia sat across from them, her hands folded in her lap to stop them from shaking. The one who smiled, Kai, she'd learn later, poured her a glass of water. The one who didn't, Kwan, slid a folder across the table. "Your father's debt is erased," Kwan said, his tone businesslike, detached. "Your family is protected. No one will touch them. As long as you honor the agreement," Kai added softly, almost apologetically. Sophia's throat tightened. "And what exactly is the agreement?" Kai leaned forward, elbows on the table, his expression kind but firm. "You marry us. Both of us." Kwan's eyes never left hers. "We share everything." Kai's voice dropped, quieter now, "including you." The room felt like it was closing in. Sophia's mind raced. She thought about running, about screaming, about demanding they let her go. But she had no passport, no money, no idea where she even was in this sprawling city. And even if she ran, their reach was global. Her uncle's words echoed in her head. "Maybe you find a way out later. Later. Not now." She looked down at the folder. Inside were documents in Korean and English, terms she barely understood, and at the bottom, a line for her signature. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen, but she kept her chin lifted, her jaw set. She signed. Quan reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 wedding bands, placing them on the table between them. They gleamed under the chandelier light, delicate and beautiful and suffocating. Sophia stared at them and realized they were heavier than chains. The wedding happened 3 days later in a private ceremony, so quiet it felt like a funeral. No guests, no music, no celebration. Just the officiant who spoke rapid Korean, a translator who barely looked at her, and the twins standing on either side of Sophia like sentries. She wore a white dress someone had left in her room, simple and elegant and completely wrong for what this actually was. Kai slipped a ring onto her finger first, his touch gentle, his eyes searching hers like he was looking for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or understanding. Quan went second, his movements efficient and cold, sliding the band into place without ceremony, without warmth. When it was over, the officiant bowed and left, and Sophia stood there between 2 husbands she didn't choose, in a country that wasn't hers, bound by vows that felt more like a sentencing. That night, she was led to the master bedroom on the 3rd floor. It was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a bed large enough to fit 5 people, dark wood furniture that smelled like expensive cologne and control. Sophia stood in the center of the room, still in that white dress, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She knew what was expected. She'd spent the last 3 days preparing herself for this moment, building walls in her mind, telling herself she could survive anything for her sister, for her family. The door opened. Both of them walked in. Kai closed the door softly behind him. Quan leaned against the dresser, arms crossed, watching her with that unreadable expression he always wore. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, and Sophia felt her nails dig into her palms. "So," she said, her voice sharper than she intended, "is this the part where you tell me how this works? Do you take turns, or—" "Stop," Kai said quietly, cutting her off. He stepped closer, hands raised like he was approaching a wounded animal. "Sophia, we're not going to touch you." She blinked. "What?" Quan pushed off the dresser, his expression still unreadable. "Not tonight. Not until you want us to." Sophia laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound that echoed in the huge room. "Want you to? You forced me into this marriage. You bought me like I'm some kind of—" "We know," Kai interrupted, and for the first time since she'd met him, his voice had an edge. "We know exactly what this looks like, but we're not animals, Sophia, and we're not going to treat you like property." Quan's jaw tightened. "You're our wife. That means something to us, even if it doesn't mean anything to you yet." Sophia stared at them, searching for the lie, the trap, the angle. But Kai's eyes were sincere, almost pained, and Quan's were still cold, but there was something else there now. Restraint, control, like he was holding himself back from something. "Then what do you want from me?" she whispered. Kai exhaled slowly. "Time. We want you to stay, to try, and when you're ready, if you're ever ready, then we'll talk about the rest." Quan moved toward the door. "There's a guest room down the hall. You can sleep there tonight if you want." Sophia's mind spun. This wasn't what she expected. She'd prepared herself for violence, for violation, for the worst. But this gentleness, this patience, it felt more dangerous somehow, because it made them human, and it was easier to hate monsters than men. "I'll take the guest room," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Kai nodded, something like relief crossing his face. Quan opened the door for her, and as she walked past him, he spoke, his voice low and rough. "We're not the enemy, Sophia, but we're not your saviors either. The sooner you understand that, the easier this will be." She didn't respond. She just walked down the hall, closed the door behind her, and finally let herself cry. The first 2 weeks in the mansion felt like living in a gilded prison, where the bars were invisible, but absolute. Sophia had her own room. The guest room became hers by unspoken agreement, and during the day the twins were mostly gone, disappearing into whatever dark business kept the Han syndicate running. She was left alone with the staff who spoke minimal English, the endless marble hallways that all looked the same, and the suffocating silence that made her feel like she was slowly going insane. She tried to establish some kind of routine, waking up, exploring the grounds, reading books from the library that lined one entire wall of the study. But every door she tried led nowhere. Every window looked out onto walls or guards, and every attempt to ask for her phone back was met with polite deflection. She was a wife in name only, a prisoner in reality, and the worst part was that her captors were almost kind about it. Kai checked on her every evening when he came home, asking if she needed anything, if she was comfortable, if the food was okay. He never pushed, never demanded, just hovered at the edges of her space like he was waiting for permission to come closer. Quan, on the other hand, barely spoke to her at all. He'd nod when they passed in the hallway, his eyes always scanning her face like he was reading a report, but he never lingered, never explained, never gave her anything to hold on to. It was Kai's warmth against Quan's cold, and Sophia didn't know which one unsettled her more. But on the 15th night, something shifted. She couldn't sleep again, so she wandered downstairs around midnight, hoping to find something to eat or maybe just to feel less alone. The kitchen was dark except for the glow of the refrigerator, and she was halfway through making herself tea when she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, heart racing, and found Quan standing in the doorway, still dressed in his suit, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, a cut on his knuckles that was still bleeding. "You're hurt," she said before she could stop herself. He glanced down at his hand like he'd forgotten about it. "It's nothing. It's bleeding." "I said it's nothing." But Sophia was already moving, grabbing the first aid kit she'd seen under the sink a few days ago, her hands working on autopilot. She gestured to the kitchen island. "Sit." Quan stared at her for a long moment, and she thought he might refuse, might walk away and leave her standing there like an idiot. But then he sat, slowly, and held out his hand. Sophia cleaned the cut in silence, her fingers steady even though her heart was pounding, and Quan watched her the entire time with that unreadable expression that made her want to scream. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. She didn't look up. "Because you're bleeding." "That's not what I mean." She pressed the bandage down harder than necessary, and he didn't even flinch. "I don't know what you mean then." Quan caught her wrist, gently but firmly, and she finally met his eyes. They weren't cold anymore. They were searching, intense, like he was trying to see past every wall she'd built. "You hate us," he said. "You should hate us. So why are you taking care of me?" Sophia pulled her hand back, her throat tight. "Maybe I'm just tired of hating people." He didn't respond, but something in his expression softened just for a second before he stood and walked out of the kitchen without another word. Sophia stood there alone, staring at the first aid kit, and realized with a sinking feeling that the walls she'd built were starting to crack, and she didn't know if that terrified her or relieved her. 3 weeks into the marriage, Sophia finally asked the question she'd been avoiding. It was late afternoon, and she found Kai in the study, going through documents with the kind of focus that made him look older than he was. She knocked on the door frame, and he looked up immediately, that warm smile appearing like it always did when he saw her. "Sophia, come in." She stepped inside but didn't sit. "I need to know something." Kai set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "Anything." "Why me?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "You could have just killed my father. You could have taken the money some other way. So why did you choose this? Why did you choose me?" Kai's smile faded, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncomfortable. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, more careful. "Because Quan saw you." Sophia frowned. "What?" 6 months ago, we were in Lagos for a meeting. Your father was there, trying to pitch some investment scheme that we knew was garbage. We were about to walk out when you came in. You were dropping off lunch for him, I think. You didn't even notice us. You just hugged your dad, told him to eat, and left. Kai's eyes softened at the memory. Kwan watched you the entire time, and when you were gone, he said something I'd never heard him say before. What did he say? Kai hesitated. He said, "I want her." Sophia's blood ran cold. So this whole thing, the debt, the marriage, all of it, was just so he could have me. No, Kai said quickly, standing up. It's not like that. Kwan doesn't do anything without reason. When your father's debt came up, when he stole from us and we had every right to kill him, Kwan saw an opportunity. Not to own you, Sophia, but to protect you. Protect me? She laughed bitterly. By trapping me here? By forcing me into a marriage I didn't want? By keeping you out of the life that would have destroyed you, Kai said, his voice firm now. Your father was spiraling. He owed money to 5 different syndicates, not just ours. If we hadn't stepped in, someone else would have, and they wouldn't have offered marriage. They would have sold you, Sophia, to men who wouldn't care if you lived or died. The room spun. Sophia gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. You're lying. I'm not. Kai's eyes were steady, unflinching. Ask your uncle. Ask anyone who knew what your father was involved in. We didn't trap you. We saved you. And yeah, maybe we're selfish. Maybe Kwan wanted you and I went along with it because I trust him more than anyone in this world. But we're not the monsters you think we are. Sophia felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Then what are you? Kai stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried that she'd never noticed before. We're men trying to survive in a world that doesn't forgive mistakes. And you, his voice softened, you're the first good thing either of us has had in a very long time. Before she could respond, the door opened and Kwan walked in, his eyes immediately locking onto Sophia. He looked between her and Kai, reading the tension in the room like he always did, and his jaw tightened. We need to talk, Kwan said, his voice low and serious. All 3 of us. Sophia's heart pounded. About what? Kwan's eyes didn't leave hers. About what happens next? They moved to the living room, the 3 of them sitting in a triangle of tension. Sophia on the couch, Kai in the armchair to her left, and Kwan standing by the window, his back to the city lights, his silhouette dark and imposing. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Kwan finally spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. You've been here a month now, he said. Not as a question, but as a statement of fact. And you've been patient. More patient than we expected. Sophia's hands clenched in her lap. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, Kwan said, turning to face her fully now. You could have fought us every day. You could have tried to run, to hurt yourself, to make this impossible. But you didn't. Kai leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What Kwan's trying to say is that you've been surviving, and we see that, we respect that. But surviving isn't living, Kwan continued, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. And we didn't bring you here just to survive, Sophia. Her pulse quickened. Then what did you bring me here for? Kai and Kwan exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations that only twins could have, and when Kai turned back to her, his expression was softer, almost vulnerable. We want you to stay, not because you're trapped, but because you choose to. Sophia laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Choose? You think I can just choose to forget how I got here? That I can choose to be okay with being sold like... We know what we did, Kwan interrupted, his voice hard but not cruel. We know we took your choice away, and we can't undo that, but we can give you a choice now. She stared at him, her heart hammering. What choice? Kwan moved closer, each step deliberate until he was standing directly in front of her. Kai rose from his chair and came to stand beside his brother, and suddenly Sophia was looking up at both of them, these two identical faces with completely different storms behind their eyes. "You can keep living in that guest room," Kai said gently. "Keep keeping us at arm's length, keep hating us, and we'll respect that. We won't push." "Or," Quan said, his voice dropping lower, rougher, "you can stop fighting what's already happened. You can stop pretending you don't feel something when we're in the same room. You can let yourself be our wife, really be our wife, and see what that actually means." Sophia's breath hitched. We're asking you to trust us," Kai said, "just for tonight. Let us show you that this doesn't have to be a prison, that we don't have to be your enemies." Quan crouched down so he was eye level with her, and when he spoke, his voice was almost gentle, something she'd never heard from him before. "You'll take the both of us tonight, Sophia, not because you have to, but because you want to." Her mind raced, every instinct screaming at her to say no, to run, to protect herself. But there was another voice, quieter, buried beneath the anger and fear, a voice that whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was tired of being alone, tired of fighting, tired of surviving instead of living. She looked at Kai, then at Quan, and saw the same thing in both their eyes. Want, yes, but also something deeper. Need. Like they were just as trapped in this as she was, just in a different kind of cage. Sophia took a shaky breath and made her choice. "Okay," she whispered. "Show me." And for the first time since she'd arrived in Seoul, she saw Quan smile.